Hello, friends. Welcome to the Peace and Power Ukraine podcast, a place to discuss all aspects of policy related to Ukraine. As you know, Ukraine sits at the crossroads of modern history, where East meets West and freedom collides with totalitarianism. Thank you for joining us during these unprecedented times. At time of this recording, there's so much happening with potential peace negotiations and ceasefires, but that's not really going to be the focus of today's discussion. We want to be a little bit more big picture and visionary, looking at Ukraine's future. Hopefully, where we get to a point of ceasefire and peace, and a chance for Ukraine to thrive. And today I'm excited to have a great guest for you, as we always try to bring more light than heat, and we dig a little deeper each episode. Today I'm joined by Oleksandr Bazar, founder and lead analyst of the Kyiv Institute for National Interest. And he leads so many of their efforts, in particular on the foreign policy front. So Oleksandr, welcome, and tell us about the Institute.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. So the Kyiv Institute for National Interest is a non-governmental think tank. We've launched it in May this year. It is focused primarily on the international relations, on the foreign policy of Ukraine, and on the internal issues of Ukraine in terms of post-war reconstruction and post-war rebuilding of country. And we've collected together a team of 22 young analysts with experience from public sector, from private sector, from NGOs, Ukrainian NGOs and international NGOs. And a large part of our team was the guys who worked with me in my previous organization. It was a fraternity. I suppose that is popular in the United States.
It is, especially now.
Yeah, we've tried to copy a little bit the American structure of fraternities and ideas, and a little bit of the Ukrainian fraternities, which started in 1990s in Lviv. We had our whole tradition with fraternities, and this was our organization for the bachelor's years in university. We've made a great number of events, dozens of events each year. In terms of international relations and domestic policy education, in terms of info campaigns, in terms of YAS national forums, and a large chunk of that organization switched to analytics, and we've get going here. And the older part of the organization is now in analytics and advocacy, but we are still connected with the fraternity and Kyiv universities, with our young part of team managing it. And we use it to engage individuals after the university in our think tank.
Yep. I think that's tremendous. I really enjoyed spending time with you recently in Kyiv, getting to understand the nature that the future for Ukraine is really going to be influenced by the young people, in particular, by that younger generation that is much more westward than even the older group, westward oriented. English skills that have been gained in university that, maybe those over 40, they don't have those skills. And it really is something that, with losing so many in the war, it will fall to this younger generation to lead Ukraine into the future. Is that the sense that you and your team have?
I suppose, yeah, but we have a great number of young people who are very promising, who want to engage in political activities in Ukraine, who want to participate in everything that connects to Ukraine. But at the same time, we have a big problem with 5 million of Ukrainians leaving Ukraine due to war, and 80% of those people are under 35 years old. So it's the internationally considered youth. And with this large chunk of youth population leaving Ukraine, it will be hard to establish ongoing transformation of Ukraine when a big chunk of population that will become retired in 10 years and there will be no one to replace them in Ukraine, it could be a problem, and it is probably one of the many important reasons why Ukraine has to end the war as quickly as possible. Because each month those people spend without Ukraine, it's 10,000, 100,000 people decided not to return to Ukraine.
Right.
So it's a
Yeah,
big problem here.
that's a great point. And once the rebuilding begins, and hopefully people can see some of the fruit of new relationships, new partnerships, like with the United States, the minerals deal, the drone technology connection and partnership, all of the military connections that can be made with the West in teaching and preparing the West for the future of warfare. That's amazing expertise. Not to mention, I think that there is great opportunity for manufacturing um, uh, allies coming and working with Ukrainians as well. So some people might be very pessimistic right now because in their minds they just see a whole country in ruins. That's what they see on the news. But that's not the case. There really is a foundation to launch from if we can get to a new period of peace.
Yeah, sure. Many industries in Ukraine are thriving even during the war times. Those includes the military industrial complex, which is, I suppose, by far now the biggest in Europe in terms of drones, in terms of uh, even missiles, in terms of
Mhm.
long range strikes, and in terms of like everything that is being made now in Ukraine. I suppose these industrial complex being integrated into the Europe, into the whole NATO structures will be a big boost for the safety of the whole Western world. And with a number of young people who are now experts in drones technologies, who are now experts in any new technologies being now manufactured in Ukraine, we can be very important and very engaged in those new structures, new ideas.
Right. So tell me a little bit more about your role there with the institute, not with the Kyiv Institute for National Interest. I want to get this. And you said KINI is the
Yeah,
acronym. Um, you're founder, and you're really focused on foreign policy. And I sense from our conversation, part of that vision you have is to move Ukraine into kind of a middle power in
yeah,
Europe
yeah,
and beyond. Is that right?
yeah. Our vision is of Ukraine becoming a middle power on international stage due to its capacities in military industrial complex, its agricultural capacities, its even capacities in the service sectors. In our think tank, we mostly focus on the expanding Ukraine's cooperation with its immediate geopolitical surroundings, because like a lot of think tanks, a lot of very good specialists in Ukraine, they concentrate on Europe, on the United States, and that's all. And we want to expand that thinking in Ukraine. We want to concentrate on Central Asia. We want to concentrate on Africa, on Middle East, on Caucasus, with this region being very important for Ukraine exports, for Ukraine standing as an important power in middle power, and being important to European Union, being important as a logistical hub. And I suppose for Ukraine, this is the way to gain its middle power status, is to move sometimes east, not only west.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now I know in the past you served in an analyst role in the office of the president
yeah, yeah.
on a lot of these issues. In that role, did you have a lot of international travel where you're doing that advocacy work? And then in this new role, do you anticipate maybe traveling to the U.S. to be an advocate for some of this and trying to build partnerships? Is that some of the vision for the future?
Uh, I haven't had the chance to travel a lot when I was working at the office of the president of Ukraine, because I was mostly stationed at the central building, central
Hmm.
structure of the office of the president of Ukraine. I was working on the strategic partnerships, on international relations, and mostly I was drafting policy papers and some uh, analytics for the guys who are actually in the delegations, for
Got it.
president himself a few times, for minister of foreign affairs. And at a whole, due to the restrictions in Ukraine on men aged from 15 years, it's hard to travel abroad. The last time I was abroad, it was in 2022, when it was still possible for students to travel. And I visited Switzerland. I've engaged in a lot of politically oriented events there. But since then, nah,
All
I
right.
also
But
start. Yeah,
do you see for you and your team after the war, that being connected and doing advocacy with the U.S. is going to be an important part of that next phase?
sure. Not even in the context of the United States. If we want to be on a one line, on one type of thinking with whole of the Western world, we need to communicate a lot with them. We need to broaden our horizons, and the best way to do it is to connect with people from very different social spheres who have their own points of view, who have a long-standing institutes in terms of analytics, because in Ukraine it's a very young sphere.
Right.
And yeah, US had think tanks, and since, I don't know, 1920s, 1930s, with them being connected to the state policy, it's very strong institutions who are inspiring for analysts in Ukraine, in Eastern Europe, on how the analysts could influence the state policies and how the state itself. Yeah.
All right. Well, let me talk to you about the nature of what's been happening in with missile attacks recently, as we think about some of the current headlines. At time of this recording, I understand it's been quiet in Kyiv for really since I was there with you, maybe about
Yeah.
10 days, 10, 11, 12 days. Um, there's some sense in the international press that this is just Putin preparing for the peace summit, and trying to not make too much noise to annoy President Trump, maybe. Is this the perspective of citizens in Kyiv, or is it? What's the feeling there on the ground?
This summer, there was a sharp increase in air attacks on Kyiv, on other large cities in central Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine. And but yes, since probably the end of July, there has been no major airstrikes. Um, Production of Shahed drones in Russia has increased dramatically for the last 6, 7 months. They are producing at least 190 drones a day. And for the most days, they launch like 40, 50 drones. And they try to stockpile those Shahed drones for massive airstrikes for like one time a week or one time per 2 weeks. When at one point of time, like 500, 600 Shahed drones are being striked on like Kyiv, on Zhytomyr, on Lviv, on other major cities, and they try to overcharge our
Overwhelm the
missile.
system.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Our air defense systems, who are not capable of destroying like 100 targets at one point of time. And yeah, for the last, I suppose, almost 2 weeks nowadays, there has been no major air attacks. This meaning that Russia is stockpiling those Shahed drones by like more than 100 a day, and they have already, I suppose, 1,000, 2,000 Shahed drones stockpiled for a case when the negotiations don't go as they want them to go. They can make a statement as quickly as they can in terms of threatening Ukraine,
Right.
putting pressure on Ukrainian allies that we are attacking more strongly than ever, that we were just toying before, and
Yeah, I think that that's probably exactly right. If we do not see a ceasefire happen, then by the time folks are listening to this, they might be seeing massive aerial attacks because this stockpiling, and that's just the nature of this evil regime. Back to how the people are feeling there, though, on the ground. Are Ukrainians feeling stronger in the support that they've received from EU nations? It feels like EU nations are stepping forward like never before. They've increased their defense spending, on paper up to 5%. A lot of that is infrastructure that really doesn't get to 5%. They can spend money on a road or bridge project. Like Italy just announced that they're spending billions and billions on a bridge to connect the mainland to Sicily, and that will be included in defense spending. So they are playing some games with the numbers there, but overall, European countries are stepping up in a bigger way than ever before, and they should deserve some credit. But how are Ukrainians feeling about that level of support from the EU at this point?
Yeah, the stepping up of our European allies is being felt greatly, and the perception of EU countries, which was always good in Ukraine, it goes through the roof. And at the same time, there is like a big decrease in opinion of the United States and President Trump due to the all the events with help suspension, with public statements on the negotiations, on Putin and Russia itself as being being made by President Trump during the last months or so. In terms of EU help, the two most important things that they provide nowadays are artillery shells and funding for domestic production of drones in Ukraine. And the first ones are mostly produced in Europe because there are large productions being set up in Germany, in Spain by Rheinmetall and others. And it is being felt on front lines because soldiers are receiving more artillery shells to fight back. There was a normative in February, I suppose, that one division of Ukrainian artillery, classical 155 millimeters, received 30, 40 artillery shells a day to fire. And nowadays it's at least 80 to 100. So it's a lot better than it was during the winter times and early,
Yeah.
early in the year.
So Spain, I heard you say Spain has actually stepped up. That surprises me. I didn't feel like they had done a whole lot to be supportive.
They're not providing a lot of help directly, but they have a big production of artillery shells at their domestically, and I suppose some of it is being bought by the European funds, and it is not being provided
Okay.
directly by Spain, because they always say that they don't have enough money. But in the
Right.
same time, it's whatever the way this help goes, it gets to Ukraine. So it's good for Ukraine. And in terms of drones, the last months have been very important for Ukrainian production of drones domestically because we received a lot of funding from the Baltic countries, from northern European countries, from Germany, from Britain, in terms of deep strike drones, in terms of investing in Ukrainian production of those drones, with Prevail Partners, British company, investing in drones, with Germany directly through the
Mhm.
government investing into Ukrainian drones, Luty, which are very good Ukrainian drones being made since winter this year also. that can carry twice as much explosives as Shahed drones, and we're finally scaling up the production of those drones.
That's
Uh,
tremendous. That's tremendous.
yeah, yeah.
I was in Estonia last month, and I know in some conversations that I had there that the sense is in that Baltic country that they are absolutely next in line, and they feel that. I think they're aware of that, and they get the urgency in supporting Ukraine. And it was heartening for me to see that there is resolve there, especially in the Baltic countries and in Poland. Each time I've been coming to Kyiv, it's always been through Poland. So I've had some meetings there and that country as well, and they really get it. They understand it is at their doorstep, and at least for them, those that are closest to it, they feel it the most, and that's given me some chance to explain to a US audience that the EU is starting to change their perspective. As much as Trump and JD Vance have put pressure on the EU to step forward and say it's not just the Americans that guarantee security, you need to guarantee your own security and be participating. That message is starting to be heard loud and clear, and that's beginning to change. I did want to ask you about this Gallup polling recently of the Ukrainian people. The new number was that 70% of Ukrainians are ready to negotiate a peace with Russia, but not necessarily give away land in exchange for peace. So help us understand that dynamic in that polling. Because it used to only
Yeah.
be a few years ago, 25% said they were ready to negotiate for peace. Now it's 70%. So it's a big change.
Yeah, it's mostly due to the fact that people are tired because like 3 years of war couldn't go unnoticed. And yeah, almost everyone wants this war to end, whether these people are like super patriotic or even those who aren't like politically inclined at all. Almost everyone wants this war to end. But yeah, the biggest question is on which terms it will end and on what terms it will end. And I suppose there was another poll in early August by Kyiv Institute of Sociology. It was published, I suppose, yesterday or 2 days ago. That said that there was a poll between three options of peace, like U.S. plan, Europe plan, and Russia plan. It was like so-called, yeah, and
Right.
only 39% of people asked, they supported the US plan, with this plan being described as Ukraine receiving security guarantees only from Europe, as Ukraine freezing the border, freezing the front line,
Mhm.
as Ukraine recognizing the Russian control of Crimea, and as like lifting the US and European sanctions against Russia. Uh, I s- Even now, when Ukrainians are tired, 61% of Ukrainians doesn't want the war to end on such terms. And I suppose there will be a big decision to be made by President Zelensky, hard decision, and if he agrees to something that Ukrainian society deems as very bad, it could even lead to some unrest domestically, because like there are at least 1 million people who have fought in the war, and at least almost each family has a member who fought in this war, and people won't be happy with the terms of ending the war that they had fought for 3 years. Yeah, and I suppose the most optimistic analytics I read for these last 2 weeks was like, yeah, the freezing of frontline the non-recognizing of the Russian occupation, and at least some sanctions to be continued. It's like the
Right.
most optimistic thing being said for the last days. And I suppose to that, Ukrainians will agree that at least some sanctions remain, the occupation is not recognized, and
And there needs to be also discussion of the return of the abducted children
yeah, yeah,
from Ukraine, and that's something that hopefully maybe we can have the International Red Cross play a role in the intermediary steps. But there's a lot to be done. We're all hopeful that there's something that can happen. The thing that I'm always left with, and I guess it was a gentleman from the Ukraine daily podcast, The Telegraph, does. He said that every day that Ukraine exists is a defeat for Russia. And that stuck with me, and that continues to give me encouragement every day, even when I think of the worst case outcomes for any peace negotiations, because there's not going to be a perfect outcome. But every day that Ukraine exists, and you are sitting there, Oleksandr, in Kyiv, every day that happens, that's a defeat for Putin. Do you agree with that? I know it might be hard to feel that sometimes, but do you agree with that sense?
yeah. Mostly, I agree, because Russia's goals in this full-scale invasion were either to capture all of Ukraine, or at least submit it to its will in terms of foreign policy, in terms of internal policy. And this didn't happen, and this most likely won't happen in the future, or at least nearest future. We've preserved our sovereignty, and even in terms of negotiations, in terms of what's going on in the future, we will always be able to stand from the table and say that this is enough, and we always will have a say in how our future is being shaped. So this is the biggest victory, I suppose, Ukraine has achieved for the last 3 years, that we still have a say in how our future is being shaped. We didn't have that luxury the last time Russia occupied us in 1917, in 1921. At least, yeah, that's much better than it was in those times.
Indeed, indeed. If there's one last thing that you want to leave us with, Oleksandr Bazar of the KINI, to be short, um, Kyiv Institute for National Interest. If there's one last thing that you would just kick yourself if you didn't share with our U.S. audience to help us crystallize this conversation today, what might it be?
Probably it's that the Ukrainians are feeling that Russia is at its brink economically and at its brink politically. And if our allies will decide to keep pushing Russia stronger, Russia will get weaker, and there is a chance for Ukraine to receive such an ending to this war that will be acceptable to everyone, even including Russia at that time. So if all our allies are united, and if we stand united with them, I suppose we can make Ukraine a middle state and middle power country. We are hoping to make it at our institution.
Yes, great, great. Well, we look forward to that bright future. We hope for that bright future. We pray for that future where there is peace for this great westward oriented country that has so much to offer. Thank you for this conversation today, and for all of our friends from across the world who are listening, in particular the United States. Please like and subscribe this podcast. Join and support. And on YouTube as well. And we thank you for being with us, and we look forward to more conversations in the future. Thank you all. See you next time.